I think, the World Cup is such a fantastic tournament. Once that first ball rolls on June 11th on in Mexico City, I mean, the world is going to come to a standstill. Everybody will be glued to the TVs because the storylines and the Cinderella stories and upsets and everything that comes with the World Cup is just going to be absolutely fascinating and exciting.
Welcome to Wait, What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast that takes an often irreverent, sometimes cynical, and on occasion a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, David Parro.
And I'm Tim McGhee.
Hope everyone listening from the United States enjoyed a nice long Memorial Day weekend. Lots of rain here in the Northeast, which meant good sports viewing, especially for all the racing. Tim, hope your weekend was great.
Weather notwithstanding, it was, thank you. Since we were on the air last week, the racing world, I hate to start on a down note, but I do think we need to recognize the passing of Kyle Busch, a true racing legend who passed away at the age of 41 from pneumonia, which turned into sepsis. And, believe it or not, I had a friend who died in a very similar fashion several years ago. And all I can say is listen to your body. If you're apparently Kyle Busch was sick for several weeks, but like any other competitor, I'm sure he was just completely driven to keep on working. Whether, he passed away in a simulator, right? So he was getting ready for the upcoming Charlotte race. And it's just such a tragic loss for the sport, for Richard Childress Racing, for his family, of course, and for the racing world at large.
Yeah. I mean, still a very capable driver. He's raced for Joe Gibbs. He currently with RCR. He's had some of the great sponsorships in sport, including M's, obviously, for so long. I had the nickname Rowdy, which I thought was perfect. And it's been unbelievable to see the tributes to him, because I think when it came down to it at the end, because let's be honest, he wasn't the most popular driver, or it's not, but he played the role perfectly, right? Like he accepted the fact that when he won and he took that famous Kyle Busch bow at the end of a win, which was just awesome, he was going to get booed by a lot of fans that were there. But Jeff Gordon got booed as well. But what no one didn't understand was that this dude could freaking drive. And he was, and coming off of the conversation we had with Cynthia Hill last week about Kyle Larson's pursuit of the double, Kyle Busch would have been the type of guy that could have pursued that. His brother did attempt it once. Kurt Busch, who was also a great, as they say in the sport, a wheelman type of driver, could get in behind anything and probably be successful. So yeah, it was a tough loss, and it was nice to see the tributes put forth at the Indy 500 and even at the F1 race, which was taking place in Montreal, was pretty amazing. And there was a moment, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a moment before the race where Kyle Busch's son, his children were there with his wife, and Owen Larson, whom we mentioned in last week's show, went up to Kyle's son and gave him a hug as they were doing the tribute. And it was like, man, this is just brutal. But what it did show is just how tight-knit the racing community, and certainly that NASCAR, something you and I have seen and witnessed firsthand.
Yeah, we were supposed to have a driver appearance for my client last weekend, which was canceled along with all sponsor activity, all team activities leading up to Charlotte. And I was talking to my contact at Joe Gibbs Racing, and you never want to see something like this happen. But when it does, you almost expect it to happen on the track. And that's a risk that's inherent in the sport. And thankfully, NASCAR hasn't had a death behind the wheel since Dale Sr. in 2001. So they've gone more than 25 years without a death on the track. But yeah, there were some beautiful tributes to him. But if you don't mind, we can, no pun intended, shift gears a little bit to a much lighter note, which was that finish to the Indianapolis 500, which was just unbelievable.
It was incredible. And, the Indy 500 with since its changed over to Fox here in the States. They're on a roll. And what they're doing with the 500 and bringing back the absolute, almost over-the-top pageantry to the event, which you can't help but take in. I mean, this is a facility. It's a 2.5-mile rounded rectangle track with a golf course inside it. They packed over 300,000 people in, which was the most that they've brought in for a while. And they have a new broadcasting team, and then to have it come down to a final lap shootout and a just over 200ths of a second between Felix Rosenqvist and David Malukas, a Chicago guy, by the way. Rosenqvist is a Swede. It was just absolutely remarkable. And I want to say something about the broadcast team here. I don't know if you caught the final lap of the race, but Will Buxton is the play-by-play guy. Will Buxton is known more for Formula One. He became famous during Drive to Survive, and he's a great presenter. He's got a great style about him. Play-by-play wasn't his, native language, if you will, as far as announcing. And that last lap, he instantly became a legend as far as I'm concerned. Him calling that. And then you have James Hinchcliffe, who I think is actually the star of that broadcast team. He's just phenomenal analyst for IndyCar. He's great on F1 as well because he does a number of races also there. But just it was great stuff.
Yeah, IndyCar was poised to, in my estimation, take over from NASCAR the mantle of most popular motorsport in America. And then they had that split. And, you and I and people of our generation, we grew up watching IndyCar much more, at least people outside the Southeast, much more than you did NASCAR, right? You think about those names, A.J. Foyt, Gordon Johncock, Janet Guthrie, Al Unser, Bobby Unser, Rick Mears. Yeah, the Andrettis. I mean, they were they just, roll off your tongue. These were your heroes if you were a motorsports fan as a kid in the 70s.
So many other positive things happening. The Indianapolis 500 purse up over 50%. Rosenqvist getting a record $4.34 million. 22 drivers earning more than $1 million. That's good stuff. That's talk value stuff. And Fox throws everything at it, right? They bring every broadcaster they have. They have, all their different talent in. Signetti was in as the ran the pace lap, and one of my favorite moments was when last year, I think it was Strahan was in the car. It might have been Brady, but I think it was Strahan driving the pace car, and he was talking to the broadcast team back in the booth, and they tried to patch in Signetti, and Signetti was so focused, he's like. But he was doing it. He was putting down good times. And he was got classic Signetti. He didn't respond to any outside stimulus. He was doing what he needed to do to be successful at what he was doing in the moment. Perfect.
Pascal Stephen Chris has a funny story. He did the Richard Petty driving school, and he went out and he did a couple of laps, and then they had, they turn it into a nice event. You have lunch or whatever, and the instructor says, "Hey, when you get back in the car, remind me to tell you about a trick to get more speed on the track." So they have lunch, and Stephen gets back in the car, and he's buckled in, and he says to the guy, "Yeah, you told me to remind you of a trick to go faster." He goes, "Yeah, step on the effing gas."
The concept of speed for laypersons like us is just like when you're around anybody that's it's just not even close. And we had that discussion with Gordy when we were talking about the luge.
All I can think about is Ricky Bobby after his accident coming back, and he's going around 10 miles an hour, and he thinks he's going 190.
I just wanted to kind of complete the motorsports thing because there was a third race. It wasn't the Monaco Grand Prix. It was the Canadian Grand Prix. And there is a 19-year-old Italian phenom named Kimi Antonelli that has won 4 straight Formula One races
19
since finishing second in the first race of the season against his teammate George Russell. And this never happened before. I mean, Mercedes was expected to dominate the season, but George Russell was expected to be the guy. And this is just, and George Russell was in the lead when his car, or I think he may have just gotten past, but his car shut off and he was out of the race, making it a little easier for Antonelli. But that's just a That's something.
I know you said put a close on it, but I did want to just say that there was an attempt at the double this past weekend. Again,
Yes.
a British
Yeah.
driver, Catherine Legge, excuse me, who unfortunately crashed out early in the race at the Indianapolis 500. Not her fault; she got run into, but then she did complete the Coke 600. So just goes to show you, it's tough.
Yeah, and Cynthia talked about that last week. It's very, very tough. She had almost the conditions to make it work, but she did complete the Coke 600, like I said. But yeah, it's a tough one. She had somebody crash in front. She made an attempt to go low, and it just wasn't going to happen. But she saved the person she hit, probably from serious injury, by not just going directly into him. So her move, I think, was a benefit. I don't think she was going to avoid a crash that put her out of the race, unfortunately. But yeah, very cool to see.
I think we got a couple more minutes before our guest joins.
Yeah, we do.
Bryson DeChambeau. Apparently, he believes the moon landing was not staged, but the photos that came out of it were fake. So I don't know how you judge that sort of conspiracy theory on the scale of 1 to 10 batshit crazy.
But he was having that discussion on an important sports podcast, right? It wasn't.
No, it wasn't on ours.
I know. I don't know what's going on. I mean, just when everyone wants to make him, like not only the face of LIV, which I think he is, but now in a bad way, like when he won the U.S. Open. I mean, we talked about like his coming out as a likable character. I think everything he's done from a YouTube standpoint has been beneficial in a way to the sport of golf on certain levels. But there was always that underlying thing, and now I guess it's just kind of come out. So I don't know. I'm curious as to how other people will, react. And maybe it's just goofy. He did say, I think, that he doesn't believe that the earth is flat, though, right?
Thank goodness for small miracles.
But I think that was posed to him at a certain way. I don't know.
I think he was forced to take a stand on the roundness of the earth. I can't believe we're having this conversation. Speaking of golfers whose temperament, at the very least, should be questioned, Garrick Higgo, who was penalized for being late for his tee time at the PGA Championship, shortly thereafter parted ways with his caddy, Austin Galgert. Talk about shooting the messenger. There's video of the caddy basically screaming at Higgo to get to the tee box. But I guess somebody had to take the fall for that.
Yeah, I remember when Bubba Watson, before he jumped to LIV, it was one of the things that always drove me crazy about him. Anytime he missed a putt, he would look immediately at his caddy like, dude. And it's like, you're the one that made the putt.
Right.
Like Jack would always say, it doesn't matter. Of course they play a role. Of course they often read your putts, but you're the one that has to make the call.
Right.
It's kind of like an AI thing. That should be an equivalent of how we deal with AI right now. I wonder. Anyway, we're going to have a lot of talk over the next few months on soccer and World Cup. There were a couple notes of World Cup related things that I think we should talk about, especially leading up to our guest today. We talk about prediction markets and the betting scene quite a bit. Just today announced that Fanatics Markets has landed the U.S. rights to offer official prediction markets on World Cup, and the global rights holder in this category is actually a Abu Dhabi royal family backed entity, ADI Predict Street. So now Fanatics kind of has that license to be able to pull it off. And basically it's a workaround for the states that don't allow betting, right, in the United States. So great news for everybody that's worried about the credibility of these markets and activity. It is significant news and not a real surprise, of course.
Yeah, it's we've talked on the show at length about betting scandals. These prediction markets are completely ripe for insider trading, which is in effect what it would be.
I haven't read enough details to understand what FIFA has in place on the prop bets. I imagine they're, trying to be, making sure that there are prop bet limitations and that they have the ability to come in and counter that. But, who really knows? It hasn't stopped things necessarily yet. But, and I now want, with the prediction markets, I want to know who's funding all of these companies, who's involved and where it's laddering up to, because it all does get pretty crazy. On the other side of this, New York City mayor, who's kind of a popular or big political figure, I'm not saying he's popular in all circles, noted democratic socialist, Zoran Mamdani, who has been railing against FIFA for not having anything priced well. And we've talked about that on this show, about the kind of the crazy pricing, and we'll talk to our guest a little about that. But he negotiated the only market that did this, 1,000 tickets at $50. So you feather in his cap. I imagine those tickets will go quickly. I don't know to whom, if they haven't already gone, but they are the cheapest tickets in the entire FIFA universe.
It is a lottery system. And of course,
Yes.
people within here in New Jersey are just really upset. They're like, we're hosting the match and we don't get any of these tickets.
Classic.
Well, maybe if you weren't so, opposed to democratic socialism. No.
For the New Yorkers, just to pay for those train fares.
Yeah, I think it's down to $90 now, or $95 round trip from Penn Station, New York to out to the Meadowlands. Meanwhile, to get from the Link to Center City, I think it's $2.90, which is what it costs every day.
I heard that buses are becoming the more popular route out there.
And MetLife Stadium, on the best day, is really hard to get in and out of.
Yeah.
So
fun.
if you're not taking
fun.
mass transit, and even when they've had mass transit, and increased buses, whether it was for a Springsteen concert or something like that, you still have to wait in a queue for quite some time for the next bus or train to come.
Yeah, but that's common at a lot of places. I'm not going to put that one squarely at MetLife Stadium, because you see markets around the world where mass transit is an important element, more so than here, where the lines and people are used to doing that. But man, they move them faster than that line coming out of Yankee Stadium at after night games, which I never understand why they're just not waiting there. But hey, that's a whole nother thing. What do you say? Take a quick break before we welcome a guest?
Sure.
It's time for our guest.
In the world of Wait What, very rarely will we have a guest back. In fact, in the history of the show, with over 155 episodes, we've only had 2 repeat guests. Today marks our third. Eduardo Solis is a senior partner lead at Airbnb, where he oversees the organization's sponsorships, including most notably their partnership with FIFA and the upcoming World Cup. Prior to that, Eduardo was with FIFA, where he was the head of commercial projects. He's also spent time on the brand and agency side with stops at both Visa and IMG. Eduardo, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. What a pleasure to be back with you, and what an honor to be a repeat guest on your program.
Well, we are honored to have you. So after more than 7 years working for FIFA, you decided to go back to the brand side to run partnerships, as we mentioned, for Airbnb. What prompted the move?
I guess the idea to take on a new challenge. Great experience at FIFA. 5 of those 7 years in Zurich at the home of FIFA, where I had the opportunity to work on the 2018 World Cup in Russia, the 2019 Women's World Cup in France, 2022 in Qatar, and 2023 Women's World Cup in Australia, New Zealand, and a lot of events and tournaments in between. And so the idea and the opportunity to take on a new challenge just happened to come about at the right time. And also knowing that it was a new challenge with a new organization and a new sort of cast of colleagues was very appealing for me. But also knowing that I was still going to have the ability to work within the FIFA environment and on a FIFA World Cup also gave me a level of comfort to know that I could take on this new challenge. So yeah, it was, again, right opportunity at the right time with a great organization on a great project, really, is what led to my decision.
On the surface, a partnership between Airbnb and FIFA certainly makes a lot of sense as North America is welcoming the world. Beyond increasing bookings, how would you lay out what the overall objectives are? What, in addition to that, would you say strategically are the objectives that Airbnb is trying to achieve?
The vision for the partnership was that it was a great platform that we could utilize to engage with all of our key stakeholders, right? Hosts, guests, communities, internal employee engagement opportunities, And so looking at the partnership and the World Cup as a platform from that lens, it was something that worked for the business as much as it did for the brand. Short-term rentals, listings are core to the business. So obviously a core objective, positioning Airbnb as a sort of multi-product platform, right? Where you can book the 16 host cities for the World Cup. But there were other things also, experiences, which were standing up across the World Cup in key markets like LA, Mexico City, Miami, New York, New Jersey, and Toronto. And then like a lot of the other, brands that play in this space, brand love, brand affinity is also instrumental in how we leverage the partnership. So if you look at it from that perspective, it was a really sort of opportunity for us to sort of roll out a partnership in an integrated way across our different verticals of the business. So that's where we are today, and we've got great plans.
I want to follow up and ask you, what are some of those plans, Eduardo? What are some of the things you're doing to welcome the world to North America? What are some of the activations that we can expect to see from Airbnb over the next month and a half or so?
Well, we've got a lot of programming from marketing and integrated marketing and comms plan. We're using the World Cup to stand up a new and exciting brand campaign. We have created some programs around what we call only on Airbnb, which are once in a lifetime experiences that you can book on our platform that are with the likes of a Hugo Sanchez in Mexico, or a Rio Ferdinand in LA, or a Caleb, I'm going to butcher his last name, McGhee, a Canadian hockey player up in Toronto. Those are very exclusive experiences that we've put together, some which were recently launched and will be going live soon. Experiences that we've created through the partnership that give us sort of that exclusive access to create, an experience for people to sign up to train like a pro, right? With Javier Mascherano or Dwayne De Rosario. We've got experiences that allow people to sign up to actually play pickup games in a World Cup stadium, right? And those are, that's within the experiences vertical, but we're also doing a lot of programs with our hosts, right? Obviously they're core. Our host community is core to what we do. So we've got a lot of pleasant surprises in the pipeline that we'll announce in due course to make sure that, we are recognizing our hosts and making sure that they are part of the World Cup experience, not just as hosts, but, as our key stakeholders.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Has the World Cup partnership kind of led Airbnb in this direction a little more aggressively than maybe it had been before with any partnerships before? Because these are tremendous ideas that you're just kind of laying out, and it keeps people in that Airbnb ecosystem that might be interested either in hosting or the short-term rentals.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been a bit of a rallying cry, right, within the organization to really lean into event partnerships. Right? I think we did a really good job earlier this year in Milan Cortina around the Winter Olympics, and that was just sort of the tip of the iceberg. Now, as we head into the summer World Cup, like no other, right? 3 host countries, 16 host cities, 48 teams, 104 matches. Right. So we're seizing the opportunity and really leaning into it to make sure that we maximize the partnership.
That's where I really wanted to go with my next question. I mean, you've been on all sides of this before, rights holder side, obviously, agency side, brand side now, of course. Go a little deeper on that. How different is this given, I think, what the expectation has been about bringing this event to North America, particularly with the all three countries involved in it?
Scale, right? And it takes a village to bring a partnership like this to life, right? Across the organization, you got to create sort of a working group within the organization across the different cross-functional teams, right? To align on sort of what is the strategy for the partnership, right? What is the plan for the partnership? How do we activate the partnership and make sure that, again, it's an integrated approach. So everybody's kind of, in their lane, but heading in the same direction, right? And then it's a cohesive narrative, right? And story that we're trying to tell. It's been a massive undertaking in really short order, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the partnership was signed last summer, not even a year, right? So we've had to bring a lot together in very short order, but it's been an amazing effort, collective effort within the organization from the top to the bottom, right? And that's important, right? You have that support of leadership that obviously then trickles down to the core team members that are responsible for delivering against the partnership.
I want to do a little bit of a pivot. FIFA has come under some scrutiny, some criticism, specifically as it relates to ticket pricing and distribution. I don't want you to speak badly of your former employer, not that you ever would, but can an organization of the size and scope and power of FIFA ever win in a PR battle like that? Or
it's a lot of
if you were running it, would you do anything differently?
It's complicated. I mean, you guys know that when it comes to, I mean, an international sports event of this magnitude, a lot of headwinds, right? There's not an exact science to it. So you've got to sort of work through it and stay the course, right? If you have a goal as to what you want to do with ticketing, right? You've got a strategy and stay the course. But as you know, I mean, it's a constant. I don't think, you know, and maybe we'll see this in a few years' time again for LA 28. Who knows, right? But I think, you know, I think it's again, the scale of an international sporting event comes with a lot of complexities, right? We're not talking about a Super Bowl, one day, one stadium, 80,000 tickets, what have you. I mean, this is a massive undertaking, tons of planning, and again, do the best that you can to make sure that the tickets get to the fans, respective sort of, you know, stakeholders within the FIFA organization. You're talking about participating member associations. You're talking about broadcasters. You're talking about commercial partners. I mean, there's a lot of people and stakeholders within the ecosystem. So you've got to, you know, work through that and make sure that everybody's able, as best as they can, to access the tournament. But I think FIFA also does a good job in that there's never going to be enough tickets to go around for everybody. So they create other settings, other FIFA sites like the FIFA Fan Festival, where people can still enjoy the World Cup and have a World Cup experience, right? There's other fan zones that are coming about in the different host cities as well. So, you know, that's just the nature of the business and nature of the beast when it comes to ticketing for these big events.
Looking back to you guys, looking back to Airbnb, you know, your host community is obviously vital to the success. And we know that Airbnb does a lot when it comes to curbing any sort of poor activity by hosts, whether it's gouging during emergencies and things like that. We have people coming from all over the world, hopefully, into the U.S. and certainly into Canada and Mexico as well. What communication do you have during events like this, particularly this one, to your hosts to make sure that they're providing the best experience for their guests that are coming in probably from or quite possibly from out of the country? And in terms of warnings on things that they shouldn't be doing, whether that's pricing or whatever, what's the program you have in place to make sure your hosts are being the best hosts they can be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, fortunately for us, I mean, North America is one of the more mature markets, right? So they're experienced hosts, right? They do this pretty regularly, right? Because we've got events like the Super Bowl, we've got events like, you know, March Madness in the Final Four and so on and so forth. So they're experienced hosts. But, you know, I think the trick to making sure that our hosts are as best prepared as possible for, you know, this influx of visitors for the World Cup is just a constant sort of engagement and communication, right? Whether it's host community clubs, bringing together hosts in certain cities to understand the dynamics of what an event like this could be like, right? And creating that community where they can share and stories with each other to get them to understand how to best approach is really useful, right? Nothing better than actually speaking somebody across the table from you that's in the same exact shoes as you are. in terms of what they've done in the past, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past, what they're thinking about doing for this summer, I think is a tool and something that we really lean into, right? We do these sort of road shows, if you will, right, across the different markets in the host cities, again, to engage with the host, arm them with as much information as possible as it relates to the tournament and the events that are happening around the tournament. Arm them with information in terms of, fans that are potentially coming, right? Things that they can share with prospective hosts or guests that have already booked with them in terms of simple things like, in the US, the legal drinking age is 21, and just very standard sort of common sense things, very, very simple things. But I think ultimately it's just, again, making sure that we're with the host every step of the way, right? And giving them a level of comfort in receiving guests during the summer. So again, emails, these road shows, these host community clubs, I think just bringing the community together so they feel prepared and comfortable to host guests from around the world and even domestically. There'll be a lot of people traveling around domestically as well.
You have to see a massive lift because you're getting people that probably had never even considered being hosts before. When it's like World Cup time, I can make some money on my play. So I'm assuming you've seen spikes in all of the major markets that you do this. And again, going back to your objectives, that's something you're trying to bring more people online to be Airbnb hosts.
Yeah, but it's a process, right? It's not from one day to the next, right? And that's where we have to stay consistent, right? With our messaging, with our communication, with our engagement, right? Because it's a process, and you've got to educate, you've got to vet, right? You've got to inform to make sure that yes, we want listings, we want the right listings, right? Because we want guests to have the right experience, right? So you have to work through that ecosystem to make sure that it's that there is supply to meet the demand.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you to take off your brand hat and put on your fan hat for just a moment and tell us who you think is going to win the World Cup and who you're rooting for. And they may be one and the same, or they may be two different countries.
Well, it's a house divided over here I'm Mexican American, right? So, depending on the day, I'm either rooting for the US or I'm rooting for Mexico. My wife's from Brazil, so she's for sure rooting for Brazil. And my daughter was born in Switzerland, although I don't think she has any, she's not rooting necessarily for Switzerland, although Switzerland, I think, would be a sleeper team in the tournament. So maybe she will be cheering for Switzerland. And so she's all over the place, my daughter. I think, the World Cup is such a fantastic tournament. Once that first ball rolls on June 11th on in Mexico City, the world is going to come to a standstill. Everybody will be glued to the TVs because the storylines and the Cinderella stories and upsets and everything that comes with the World Cup is just going to be absolutely fascinating and exciting. I will be rooting for, again, USA, Mexico. My third team will be Brazil. Who do I think is going to win it? My early favorite to win it was Spain, but I've had second thoughts about that, and it's a competitive field, right? I think France will be strong, England will be strong, the usual suspects. I'd love to see a Senegal really get into the quarterfinals, even into the semifinals. I'd love to see an African team make it into the final. I think that would just be epic. Ultimately, I think for whatever reason, Brazil, 30 years later, back on U.S. soil, and after a 24-year drought or something like that, ends up lifting the trophy. But only time will tell. We'll see.
There's a lot of good football to be played over the next 6 weeks, so I can't wait to see it. Thank you for sharing that. It shows you what a poor consumer I am. I don't even remember the brand, but I do remember seeing Memo Ochoa, longtime keeper for 𝗘𝗽𝗀𝗀, in a commercial here in the States just the other night, and I'm now for the life of me I can't remember what brand it was for. Anyway, before we let you go, we have the same two questions we asked you the first time you were here. And knowing David, he'll probably go back and compare your answers today to your answers the first time. But
you're lucky, actually. I didn't this time. Still, we expect them to be better than the last time we asked them. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, he's more experienced, more mature.
He's got more under his belt.
Which you can't say for either one of us, but,
right.
but we can say it for a dude.
We've gone backwards.
Yeah, we're about 2 episodes away from becoming Wayne's World. How'd you get your start into the sports industry?
I got my start back in Chicago, fresh out of DePaul University, as a transportation coordinator. I was running transportation for local events, and then they became sort of national events. You know, one thing led to another. Again, just, grinding it out. Again, led to a Super Bowl. I think the first Super Bowl that I did was in Jacksonville, and then I was doing I ended up doing transport detail for the Sports Illustrated Super Bowl party when there was a Sports Illustrated Super Bowl party. I don't even know if that exists anymore. And it was supposed to be Snoop Dogg for that show. Mm-hmm. And a week before, he got busted out in LA for some antics, and they brought in some young and up-and-comer called Kanye West. And so I was running talk about transportation. But again, one thing led to another. I did a Super Bowl, then I did a Final Four. And then next thing I knew, I was in Sydney, Australia, working more on the ops side at the Summer Olympics. And just little by little, cut my teeth doing a lot of different things, from transportation coordinator to just overall sort of event operations and logistics, and then more into the planning side of it. Kind of took on a life of its own, and, ended up at some point getting the call up, if you will, to an agency called Sportsmark Marketing Group out in San Francisco. Had a massive roster of Olympic sponsors. They took me to Salt Lake for the Winter Olympics, and 2004 Athens, and working on a bunch of programs. And then they brought me in-house, and I started working on the Visa Signature platform and sponsorships. And that's where it all kind of really took shape in terms of, the strategy side of it, the planning side of it, the management side of it. And so, yeah, it's been a strange trip.
So Eduardo was a guest on our 43rd episode, by the way. So this is episode 156. So
wow.
We've accomplished a few things anyway in between that time.
3 years later.
I had forgotten Eduardo, and you may remember because I got so excited when you mentioned coming out of DePaul, because my first job was at DePaul. I was the assistant SID at DePaul coming out of ACC country, moving to Chicago then, and just
love it.
What a great place to be, right? In the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago.
Yeah, that's home sweet home for me.
Yeah.
All right, last question. What one piece of advice would you have for a young person looking to break into the sports industry?
From experience, and maybe this is not for everybody, but keep your head down and do the work. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine back in Lincoln Park, back in Chicago, out of DePaul, doing transportation, as a transportation coordinator, that I'd end up where I was today. But, I kept my head down. I did the work, right? I learned from people that were in the business that I thought were good people, smart people, latched onto some mentors that helped me sort of steer me in the right direction, always gave me sound advice, but it ultimately came down to doing the work. There was in my view, no easy way to get, to a position, not to a position, but within the sports and the sponsorship partnership world, without actually having to put in the work and gain that, experience.
Having worked with you for a time and followed your continued success since then, I can tell our listeners, if you're looking for advice, you'd be well served to listen to it too. Eduardo Solis, thank you so much for coming on. We wish you nothing but great luck and success with all that you're doing here at the World Cup. Safe travels, great activations, great results. And we'll have you on again at some point, I'm sure.
Love it. I love it. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to join you all again. At 3 years almost to the date, right? We talked, I think, in 2022, right before Qatar. So here we are. Fantastic. Thanks again, Jen.
Take care.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
We are back. Thank you again to Eduardo Solis, Senior Partnership Lead for Airbnb, as he prepares for the upcoming World Cup coming to North America. Can't believe he took time out of his schedule to talk to us, but that was really kind of him. Now's a part of the show where we take a look forward, we make corrections, we give shout outs. David, what do you got?
First, I want to start with a shout out. Memorial Day weekend wasn't just a great racing weekend. It was NCAA lacrosse championships, both on the men's and women's side. And I'm not here to say anything about Princeton winning the national championship, one of your Big Red's top rivals. But on the women's side, Northwestern women's team wins their ninth championship, which is just amazing, beating a very powerful North Carolina team. They did it in Evanston. And part of why this stands out to me is, and my daughter Jill is visiting me here in New York this week, and Jill played lacrosse in high school outside of Chicago, and she got to a state final game that they played often at Northwestern Stadium there right on the lake up in Evanston, and it was just an amazing sight. Their coach actually was one of the star players from that initial run of championships that Northwestern won in women's lacrosse. So that was exciting to see, and just congratulations, because that to me is an incredible accomplishment.
Kelly Amonte Heller, who's longtime coach at Northwestern, is just unbelievable. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but Summit, the town where I reside, has a long and storied history of success in high school lacrosse on both the boys and the girls side. We had a young woman, I think she graduated from Northwestern in probably 2022, 21, something like that, 22. Anyway, she was a first-team All-American player of the year in the state of New Jersey on a state championship winning team. Didn't see the field for 3 years at Northwestern. That's how good they are.
Yeah, it's really cool. And let's be honest, a ton of those, I'm not so sure now because I haven't seen their roster, but a ton of those players started coming from New Jersey, coming from the mid-Atlantic states and northeastern states that produce so many great lacrosse players, and that's how they kind of built their program. Anyway, again, thought it was cool.
By the way, just so you know, Princeton had 2 losses this year, one of which was to Cornell.
Very cool. I saw that Cornell, I think, finished 5th in the NCAA men's rankings. Is that right?
Which means nothing because they lost in the first round to a team they shouldn't have lost to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The story that I'm keeping on, because the French Open is underway right now in Paris, some of the top names in tennis players have been threatening or had threatened a boycott particularly of the slams, because in the Grand Slam events, the players aren't getting as big a cut as they get in their other top tournaments that they play in. So Aryna Sabalenka, Coco Gauff in particular, or names have popped up, even Sinner on the men's side. And what they've ended up doing is not boycotting these events, which wouldn't be good, I don't think, for anyone, but basically doing what is known as a kind of a work to rule protest, meaning they're not doing anything more than they absolutely have to in terms of their requirements as players. So they're limiting their media time and so forth. But I think it's an interesting thing that these top players are saying, hey, we're the event. It's like any other labor dispute, I guess. They're using the leverage at the time that they can. And they are in discussions with Roland Garros to discuss that. And obviously it'll pop up again probably when Wimbledon, which is, right around the corner as well. Anyway, I think a cool story to follow. Hopefully we can get someone on that can shed some light on that in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I would argue that individual athletes like tennis players and golfers have even more power than team sports players when it comes to affecting change in their respective sports. And listen, they are the show.
Yeah. What about you? What do you have your eye on?
Well, I've got one shout out, past guest, longtime industry stalwart and friend of both you and I, Mary Scott, along with another longtime industry person, Leslie Ann Wade, are creating a sports biz academy. That's going to be held for high school students out here at Drew University, which is not too far from where I'm sitting right here in New Jersey. So good luck to them. You could learn from a lot worse people than PR pro Leslie Ann Wade and Mary Scott.
Yeah.
What am I looking forward to? Bing bong. The Knicks are back in the finals for the first time since 1999, or as somebody on the interwebs said, 2 years before Bill Belichick's girlfriend was born. They are on a historic run. They lost 2 games to to Atlanta in the first round, but the margin of victory has just been unprecedented. It's historic. So, as a Knicks fan, let the Spurs and the Thunder beat each other up. before they make it to the final, but I think either one of those teams could be very tough to beat.
They're not only going to be tough to beat, they're going to be tough to beat. There's no doubt about that. But I do think that either team that ends up facing off against the Knicks, that these viewership numbers and the enthusiasm around the NBA is going to be huge, because we've already seen big numbers. New York is helping drive that, but the stardom on OKC, I mean, that's a loaded team. And then the emergence of Wemby has just been, pretty amazing, because you have to change your game to play against him. I think OKC is the overall stronger team. A lot of people really starting to question their approach on getting fouls, but that's whatever. But I honestly can't wait to see any of those games. I mean, I'm chomping at the bit, and I'm not even an original New Yorker, but this team has caught my attention and fancy as well.
What I like about New York is when New York has a team vying for a championship, and it doesn't matter what sport it is, this huge city takes on a very small town feel, right? You can feel the energy when you're on the streets of New York. You see it. You see people wearing the colors. You see people giving each other high fives or just a nod when they see somebody wearing it. And then, on game night, if you're in the city, you just feel it. You just feel the energy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable the amount of, and just for anyone outside of the city, the amount of Knicks apparel and merch that is being showcased now just walking around the city. I love, kind of looking out on the Empire State Building, and the lights often will be kind of Knicks colored up, and that's always exciting. I will say one other thing, that the celeb row of Knicks, I'm not saying that there aren't bandwagon jumpers, but the celebrity row of New York Knicks games, these are like legit will not miss games. And even, as they were in Cleveland, and Spike was there, and Chalamet was there, and Tracy Morgan and Stiller, these guys are as diehard as they come. It's not just a passing fancy with these guys.
No, the one guy I take great exception to is Stephen A. Smith, who is,
Don't even get me
he's going to
started.
sprain an ankle jumping on and off the bandwagon so much. I particularly love the clip of him talking about what a bad signing Jalen Brunson was several years ago. He's your boy. He's your neighbor. I shouldn't be talking bad about your neighbor.
He was my neighbor till I moved to Nomad, so I don't have to run into him at the pizza joint anymore.
His loss. Yeah, well, listen,
I agree.
Thank you, David. Thanks again to Eduardo Solis. But most importantly, thank you to you, our listeners. If you like what you hear, smash that like button, comment, follow, subscribe. Check us out on any platform. And if you can't check us out on any platform, go to dpandmcgee.com. Until next week, he's DP, I'm McGhee, and we'll talk soon.